kind of like a, I think people like Mike because he's kind of a unique kind of character.
And I have
You just see how games of possession how they mean more.
I'm not putting him on.
I think the U.S. is going to obviously win.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Nothing But Respect. I am joined by Patrick Redford, and today we have a special guest, a long time in the making. I'm glad we could get it done. We have documentarian Mike Nicoll, who has a new documentary out now. I'm looking at him to confirm now, called The Spoils, all about all things, I would say, AAU basketball, the underbelly of the business of basketball. And on this show, we've it's almost like a Nothing But Respect bingo card. We'll be like the professionalization of the lower ranks and all this stuff. And so much of it starts and ends with AAU. So, and everything in Mike's doc. So we're very excited to have you on, Mike. Thank you for joining.
I'm delighted to be here, fellas. Let's start unpacking this shit.
Thanks for
Patrick,
coming on. I mean, we're doing this the morning of Game 5 of the NBA Finals. Well, have you been watching? What do you think so far?
I'm a basketball junkie, lifelong. I mean, basketball has been like the through line of my life. So despite having two small kids and my filmmaking career being really full, I still can't quit playoff basketball, even if I wanted to. The regular season product is a different story, and we can get into all of the ways if you guys are curious about, I would not personally say that the NBA is in particularly good shape from a health of the product standpoint, and that the root causes of that are, I think, really fascinating to talk about, and we can get into that. But yeah, the last, fourth quarter of a playoff game, I that's just built into me. So yeah, I'm watching.
I was going to say, one of the things you can almost guarantee about any NBA player playing in a game in the NBA Finals, but probably even in some fucking random regular season game, is that at one point or another, they played some AAU basketball.
I think the sort of heritage, background, pedigree of American-born NBA players is close to 99.9% as far as being products of the American basketball pipeline, which is a fancy way of saying AAU basketball.
And so let's start there, actually, because we wanted to kind of get a 10,000 foot view of people dropping in who maybe aren't even aware that there's this youth system, et cetera. And not just that there's a system, but that it's changed drastically over 30 years. You look at even all the hubbub around LeBron's AAU debuts and stuff. And even that is quaint, tiny, small potatoes compared to what we're seeing now. So can you talk a little bit about what AAU basketball is and some of its origins, and then how it has changed over maybe the last 20 years?
So, we're going to get into all of this right now, but I really encourage everybody listening to go check The Spoils out, because the film, I believe, is really unlike any basketball or sports documentary that's ever been made, from an access point, from an honesty standpoint, from a, just system portrait standpoint. And what you're really asking about, what is AAU basketball? The answers to that question have ramifications upstream in really significant ways, right? So if you are an NBA basketball fan, if you consume this product anywhere around the world, if it's a part of your life, the foundational incentives that are established on the AAU level, we can call that the grassroots level, directly impact the product that you are consuming in ways that would probably be pretty staggering to fully comprehend. And our film, The Spoils, on its surface is about the AAU world, but I built and engineered it to be about the American system writ large. Because one of the core theses of the film is that AAU culture, ethos, philosophy, mentality trickles up to the NBA, not down, right? So back to the what is AAU thing. So, the reality is, AAU basketball does not have a clean definition, and that is by design. We could start by the nomenclature on its own. when people say AAU basketball, first, most people would be surprised to know that the AAU is actually a private organization based in Florida that runs these quotes, heavy air quotes. Or, well, actually, when it comes to the AAU, I will still say that if the word amateur has any relevance anymore, the AAU might be able to lay a claim to that. But it's called the Amateur Athletic Union. It's a organization rooted in Florida, and they hold junior tournaments for kids of all ages across all sports. Track, swimming, basketball, volleyball. Like 8 and under, 9 and under, 10 and under, all the way up. I don't know how old they go now. But the hilarious thing is, because the value of these prospects of young basketball players is so potentially lucrative, right? There has been this very, very privatized industry that's been built up around that. So when people say AAU basketball, they are actually referring to a private, invite-only basketball circuit that is bankrolled by the shoe companies that has no affiliation whatsoever with the actual AAU. So, I've never actually seen a pod or an interview with an executive at the AAU talking about how they really feel about having been dragged into this sort of like association with this other world that frankly has nothing to do with them, but they kind of have to wear that reputationally. But nevertheless, I would probably say the simplest way to define AAU basketball is the mandatory matriculation pipeline to advance in American basketball.
Like, would you say that for a big time prospect, it's more important to perform in like an AAU setting than like a high school basketball setting?
100%.
Why is that?
Fair to say that AAU basketball rendered traditional high school basketball irrelevant decades ago. Wow. And there's lots of reasons for that. But one of the most practical is just simply that, these big time college recruiting staffs only have a very limited amount of time to dedicate to recruiting. Now, sure, they have like assistants and like staffers whose sole job it is to scout. But when it comes time for like the main decision makers to evaluate these guys, traveling to remote high school gyms throughout the season when you are actually yourself playing as a college team is a really inefficient way to do this. So one of the ways that AAU basketball, the shoe companies really gamed this out back in the 90s was by centralizing all the best players in one place for these summer exhibitions, tournaments, skills camps, and they make it easy for for NBA scouts, for college recruiters to sort of descend on one location and get a look at the best guys, not only the best guys in one place, but in theory, going up against each other. Now we could get into the competitiveness and the sort of nature of the basketball that actually gets played at these events, and whether or not that's translating to the next level, because I think that's its own sort of
totally
basketball nerd conversation, or as to whether or not AAU basketball is actually preparing our guys to succeed at the next levels. So I could go on and on and on, but I would, to define it, the mandatory matriculation pipeline that we use in America to filter out who goes to the next level is AAU basketball.
It's funny, and that all totally checks out. I played AAU, or I played like travel ball, right? It's a few things. One, it's so interesting what you're saying about that AAU actually is almost like this shorthand for what exactly what you're talking about, and the degrees to which probably the shoe companies are totally fine for everybody to call it AAU basketball, because it obfuscates the idea that what this really is like a giant Nike fest or Adidas fest that 14-year-olds go to and get pimped out, or whatever, get sold.
Sold is well, so that's part of what has changed and evolved. I think now we're in this sort of player empowerment era. So, players I think have more agency than they ever have. But there is no doubt that I would call, I might be getting ahead of ourselves here, but today in 2025, the thing that really jumps out to me about the AAU basketball space, and let's ground this conversation in the perhaps fanciful fucking notion that this incubative space should be a basketball development centric arena or domain. However, I think it is indisputably true now that what it actually is brand building and relationship building. And again, to get not ahead of myself, but thematically, I'm a big believer, and I've talked about this as the film has been rolling out, is that there can only be in any equation one main thing or one main priority. And so if the basketball development is not the main thing anymore, then what is? And, I think that's where you really start to see the upstream ramifications of the chaos that kind of rules this space. So
you mentioned earlier that this model, this like summer tournament centralizing thing, was sort of rolled out in the 90s. I'm curious, like, what was it like before then? And if you are taking forward this thesis, like the trickle up thesis, like when do you personally start to see these effects in like the highest levels?
Well, so I think that there's a few tracking devices we could use to sort of like chart the evolution. There's no doubt that, KG and Kobe going straight to the league was a huge inflection point, just because when high schoolers are now eligible to be drafted, or not even eligible because they were eligible before, but when they are seen as more viable possibilities, that then brings a huge influx of NBA scouts into these gyms in ways that they weren't there before. I think another big thematic through line of our film is the way that AAU basketball has individualized a team game. And so when I start to really look back on the history of this landscape, I think you can really chart the demise of the power of college coaches to be sort of declining in lockstep with the rise of this world, right? So when you had in the 90s, these institutions, these programs being run by these really iron-fisted, team first, program first coaches.
Right.
Right.
Who would basically like maybe a guy like Bob Huggins or something, who, if you came in and you were like, I want to be my own brand, he would be like, fuck off.
Fuck off. Yeah. No, I mean, let's just run it down. I mean, like going from like, just think about the coaches that like kind of dominated the 90s, right? You got like George Thompson at Georgetown. You got like Jim Boeheim at Syracuse, obviously Coach K at Duke, Tom Izzo, we could keep, Bobby Knight obviously was sort of the forefather of a lot of this shit. But like, to me, the common denominator with all of these guys, and there's certainly more on the list, is that like, you're going to fit into my shit.
Right.
Right. There's no question who the sort of like most important employee at this business is, right? It was the college head coach for a long, long time. But I think the AAU system's relevance can be seen as upticking as you saw players start to become the most important employee, and the sort of subsequent awareness that they then had, I think really put the actual power dynamics in real stark contrast, because those power dynamics, the players have always had the power. It's just been like their awareness and willingness to leverage it. Now we could talk about whether they're leveraging it for their own benefit optimally, which I think is its own interesting conversation, because everything about life is trade-offs, right? So there's no doubt that the pendulum has swung in the completely opposite direction now. Whether or not that's actually in the best interest of these children and young adults is a whole other conversation. But
to use the Bob Huggins, like Bobby Knight example, like, isn't it good that the players are the ones who have the power? Because like I think about like those sort of like the last era of like the powerhouse coach. Like, who was the Virginia guy that just retired like right before the season started?
Oh, yeah.
To me, that was just basically him realizing, like, with NIL and everything, this is just like a different thing. Like the coach, the job I signed up for just doesn't exist anymore, which is like, on the one hand, if you're a college basketball fan, probably sucks. But if your angle on all this is like pro labor, of like players having the power and like doing what they want, like, shouldn't fans root for that?
So I think this is a fascinating conversation, right? And if you're
I guess that's sort of the tension of the whole movie, basically.
Yeah, no. Well, so certainly I think I built the film to, at its core, be focused on what I might call the soul or spirit of the game, which I realize in 2025 makes me a little bit of an outlier, right? Like, I just want to sort of preface this by saying that I'm fully aware that there is essentially one note to this modern conversation, which is some version of get the bag. And there is no disputing the fact that these players have been exploited and, taken advantage of for decades. And so our film is not in any way here to say that didn't take place, should have taken place. I think it is really laser focused on how that used to happen. And, our film is very much a process film, because I think to understand the outcome, you have to understand the inputs, right? So, but Pat, I want to kind of key on what you said. Isn't that good? For what and for whom? So there's a conversation about whether or not this is good for the fans, AKA the consumers of this product. There's a conversation around whether this is good for the game itself. And then there's a conversation around whether it's actually good for the players. Now, if we're going to measure good for the players strictly by their bank account balance, then I don't think that there's any way to argue that.
Resounding yes. Yeah.
Although, to devil's advocate myself, something that I think the film sort of makes a good implicit argument about is there is a kind of cautionary tale possibility to a lot of this. I look at someone like Mikey Williams and he gets this Puma deal. He's this mega super turbo star, popular young basketball player who probably isn't going to play in the NBA. And you could make the argument, I guess, that maybe his long-term bank account will suffer for being so ingrained in the system, right?
Absolutely. And Wosny Lambre from The Ringer, who we interview in the film, makes this point that, okay, so player agency and player empowerment is good. Or let's accept that it's good.
Accepting it for a second. Yeah.
Yes. Let's stipulate that it's good. What you now have is 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old humans now being in positions of power. And the question is how able they are to make decisions that are in their own best interests. When you couple that with the, let's just say, circle of folks that surrounds that child or teenager, it's a real roll of the dice in terms of the quality of that, first circle. So on paper, the players having more power is good, or it can be a good thing. But, what's that saying? You're only as smart or capable as the sort of the quality of the five people closest to you. To say nothing,
it's not unambiguous, right?
Well, to say nothing of how undeveloped your worldview is at that point. Even let's just take.
That's my thing. Is I'm if you gave
brand
me
building aspect of this,
fame
right?
at 14, dude, I would have been a fucking moron.
I really want to talk with you guys later about the NIL part of this because it's really
definitely.
The sort of financials of that are really fascinating to me. But even so, I say a lot that. Back on the idea of there can only be one main thing. Yeah. I would say now we were on generation 2 or generation 3 of America's young players worshiping social media, visibility, brand building, and NIL. Let's just put all of that in one sort of individualized bucket, right? Worshiping that at least on par with their game getting better, where they fit into a team structure, how they're going to act, if basketball is their life's work, that thing being the alternate main thing, right? I would just simply ask, what the fuck does a 14-year-old know about their brand and who they are? And in what position are they able to line that up in a way, even the idea, they're so incomplete. Even the idea that they are doing anything other than chasing bullshit one step at a time for the sake of money accumulation, I think is totally delusional. And if that's your goal, is to stack as many dollars as you can, cool. I'm not here to say that shouldn't be your goal, But that goal is not the same thing as going as far as you can in the basketball sort of meritocracy, becoming the best player you can be, becoming the best teammate. I mean, this is a team game at the end of the day, right? So like there's a lot of things that are just constantly in conflict with one another, that I think, the AAU world is just a chaos incubator in that way. And that's one of the real value propositions of our film, for the hundreds of thousands of families that go through this system every year and are chasing a hoop dream. If you don't have a real firm handle on what your goal and target is, you are never going to hit a target you're not aiming at. And so whether it's Mikey Williams is obviously a really famous example, but like think about all the just like the untold number of kids, teenagers who get swept up into this, swirling, moving target shit. And it's like if parents, these families are in the deep end of the ocean without a paddle, and if you don't understand the incentives that are driving this system, that's where you get sayings like "use the system before it uses you." But the system will use you. Do you know how to use the system, and what are you using it for? Right? These would be my questions.
Yeah, because there's like fewer than 500 NBA players, like
correct.
Not that enter the league every year, like total. But I guess like I do sort of want to have the style of play argument, because like when I watch these finals, I actually see some of the least individuated basketball I've like maybe ever seen. Like the thing that makes most of these teams special is that like they're so deep and they play this like extremely coordinated, like high level team style. Like you can maybe quibble with some of the Shea just dribbling the air out of the ball stuff, but like the evolution we've seen in the last like year in particular with teams like, the Magic, the Rockets, all these guys, like I think a lot of people have connected the increased depth with the quote unquote professionalization of the lower levels, which does sort of seem at odds with this thesis that everyone is just coming up to like do their own thing and at the explicit expense of the team aspects of basketball. Like, I don't know. How do you square that?
Well, I would say that, and again, I gotta concede that like this year, I mean, I have like a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old.
Yeah.
So,
you're not crunching Pelicans Hornets on a Wednesday?
This season has probably been the least viewed for me of any NBA season, but like I said, I can't quit it. So permit me a little bit of a
not trying to grill a father just after Father's Day.
No. I track it enough to, I think, hang in this conversation. What I see is, a few things. I would say that the early specialization from a skill development standpoint for these in this world, which again, we could argue. I think I just saw Draymond the other day talking about how like he didn't have an individual skills coach until he was at Michigan State, and for the bulk of his developmental years, he would just show up at the gym and fucking run, and just like that's where a lot of his instincts were developed, right? Yeah. And like it's like you got to learn how to improvise, you got to learn how to play off against, all sorts of things that sort of come in that more improvised setting, right? Versus drilling, 2-dribble step back, over and over and over to where like that's what you're hunting, right?
Yeah.
But I would say looking at the NBA, I would say that the Thunder and the Pacers are, I don't think that you could say that they're the only outliers, but like
you could.
Yeah.
I watched, God rest his soul. There's this Kobe clip that has been making the rounds lately about how the NBA today is sort of accidental basketball. And it's basically this like drive and kick fest. And, whether you look at the Celtics who won last year, obviously the Warriors, the Warriors had a really beautiful style, at their peak, but so much of the offenses are geared around getting up as many threes as you can. And we can talk about how they get into those looks. But I think one of the reasons that the NBA product is not maybe in the best spot is the sort of homogeneity of the offensive styles, right? Like, and part of that is because I think going back to the skill development, the talent discrepancy has been really flattened. Like the distance between the quality of like of players, let's call it 3 through 6 or 7 in a rotation, is so much more even now. What stands out to me is I really think that as a consequence of that happening, there's ironically a higher premium on coaching brilliance now than maybe there has been in the more recent past, where the like raw talent was just sort of more of a like, let's get the super team going, roll the ball out, and let LeBron and D Wade kind of take turn, or just like let our best guys generate our looks. But when the talent distribution on the court is flatter, I think that makes a coach like Rick Carlisle, or some of these. I mean, I don't think you can really poke any holes in like what a brilliant coach Rick Carlisle is at this point. I mean,
man.
His longevity, his willingness to adapt. I mean, but anyway, so I think ironically, the coaching strategy is probably more like at a premium now than it's been. But yeah, I mean, we could debate if you really. I don't know if your audience is into the like true basketball nerd part of this shit. I think the fascinating part about what the Pacers do and the Thunder do, that the Pacers specifically, they really maximize the front end of the shot clock from a motion standpoint. I think they're still hunting the same obvious shit.
Yeah.
But they're a lot more creative in the stuff that they get across the timeline faster, and they're a lot more creative with the misdirection that they're running before they get into start hunting whatever it is that they want. So I think that's, look, the NBA is like the best league in the world. So I would never sit here and say that there's not like brilliant shit happening. But that's again on a coaching side of things. And, again, I think you look at the rosters in the finals. These are, I would be curious to sort of do a chart of how highly recruited.
Right. AAU, how many of these guys really were on AAU super teams?
Like playing these big roles were, because I don't see a lot of like top 20 names.
It's basically just Chet. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's
like,
really
Albert
interesting.
is not a guy like that.
Totally.
Neesmith, Nemhart, even J-Dub, Shea, he's Canadian, so it's he's a little bit off the radar a little bit, and certainly I think there's fascinating conversations to be had around the way other countries do development, which
I wanted to ask about that. Because in the film, there's this interview clip of Kobe. I forget exactly what he says, but he's basically just like, AAU is ruining NBA basketball. And I think like when I sort of started becoming, aware of this, like after my horrible AAU career ended and I started writing about basketball because I wasn't good enough at playing it. You hear a lot of people saying like the Europeans come into the league ready to play. Like they all know how to do everything. They all know how to pass and like drill skills and stuff. And when I was like coming up, the received wisdom I had was like, oh, AAU guys just play basketball, whereas the European guys drill skills. Like, is that sort of correct? And like, why, I guess, do you think the European dudes are more prepared, and why?
Well, I grew up playing AAU basketball in Los Angeles in the 90s. So, and then I've spent, the last 25 years of my life in one stage or another.
Wait, really quickly, did any big names hang any points on you?
Well, I played with two NBA champions on my team. Trevor Ariza and Gabe Pruitt were my team.
Oh, hell yeah.
So maybe you were doing the hanging.
I was not the best player on my AAU basketball team.
Sure.
I think those were my two guys growing up. And so to see Trev go on and win a championship starting next to Kobe was like, surreal. I say all that to say, I didn't grow up in Slovenia. I am not a Canadian. Like I don't have firsthand experience of the way they do it. But I think certainly from a results standpoint, whether you want to look at the last 7 MVPs are all foreign born, or 7, I think, going back to
since Harden, yeah.
Yeah, since Harden. Every MVP since James Harden in 2018 has been a non-American player. I think that is also borne out on the All NBA teams, whatever. And then, there's a few things. I think number one, the Europeans for a long time have had less of a facade around professionalizing shit, right? Like they've been more willing to call a spade for a long time. I mean, somebody like Luka has been playing against grown men as a professional since he was 14. I know this gets talked about a lot. But they're just like, there are a lot more ways for like, if you want to make basketball your life's work, you don't have to pretend in any real way, right? And then, I think from a basketball philosophy standpoint, I think that there's a lot more, there's a lot less, let's just say, there's a lot less ISO bullshit.
Yeah, totally.
Like I was thinking about like a 15-year-old Luka who's like good enough to earn money playing basketball. So he like plays for Real Madrid, but someone like, I don't know, like Jalen Clark is in the film. Like, and it's like, he is earning money by playing for the Compton Magic, which is like this Adidas feeder school. And his like, the actual basketball seems sort of ancillary to it. So I do want to get back to like, maybe this is a good place to bring in Atope, who I think is like this fascinating figure. Like, how did you first get hooked up with him?
I spent over 10 years directing The Spoils. I met Tope back in 2012. So actually The Spoils is the second feature film I've made about the sort of American basketball AAU world. My first film, At All Costs, was my first film out of film school. Netflix acquired it. And so when I started making that film, I actually went back to my own my old AAU coach. Like literally, if you want to talk about the filmmaking, casting is as important in documentary films as it is in scripted. Everyone thinks of casting, they think of, go get Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or whatever. Casting in documentaries is equally, if not more important. So back in 2012, I went to John, my old AAU coach, and I was like, look, I want to make a film about this world. Who do I need to talk to? And he was like, Tope runs Los Angeles. Like, he is where I would start if I were you. Mm-hmm. So John introduced me to Tope. I pitched Tope on the vision for At All Costs. He was down. Tope, I think, by any account, is a genius marketer. And I think that's something that we has played into his success quite significantly and is on full display in the film. Because I think, again, the relationship building and the networking in this world is as important as what's happening on the court. And there is certainly nobody that's more plugged in, really at every level of the game. Like, he says in the film, like, NBA GMs know his name, right? So to say nothing of the like tentacles he has in various coaching staffs. He used to run the Pac-12, like when the Pac-12 was still the Pac-12, like, if any school wanted to recruit his players, they basically needed one of his affiliates on their staff. So that was like prereq number one. Uh-huh. And then,
can I jump in for a sec? Cause there's a lot in what you're talking about that I want to keep going into. The one thing that you were saying, to our listeners, like basketball nerd stuff. I think enough. Yes. But what once you start hearing the phrase tentacles going everywhere, that's the NBR base. But I bring this up to say, Atope is the creator and founder of the Compton Magic,
which is CEO of the Compton Magic, which is, I would say, pound for pound, the premier or one of the premier AAU programs in America.
Tons of NBA talent. Probably the biggest name right now, Evan Mobley, and also the like you said, the star of your documentary. You're with them for 10, 12 years. Anytime you get one of those interview somebody in 2024 and the timeline goes back and you see him in 2012, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to lock in. This is this gentleman has been working hard on this doc. But I do want to push you on something within this stuff, and you actually were already doing it, which is great. Which is, you were like, Atope was in a different interview at one point. You were like, Atope is one of the most powerful people in this ecosystem that nobody has ever heard of, and it's true. I had not heard of him. I don't think Patrick had either. No. And then you're saying, oh, he runs the Pac-12. What I really want to know is, like, what does that look like? I understand that the power moves in these, like, it's a relationship business. It's the you got to pick up and you got to call Tope. But what I want to know is, like, when it is nut crunching time, is it, and you just alluded to it, I think, with this idea of, like, oh yeah, you want Aaron Gordon, like, well, one of my guys is on the staff at Arizona then, or something, like, not that I made that up, but how does it really move?
Well, so I want to be careful to not speak for Atope, because I have immense respect for Tope and what he's built. And quite honestly, I don't mean to, this is not meant to dodge your question. Yep. I think our film the spoils puts everything that he does on display in ways both explicit and implicit. I'm a big believer in not like shaking my finger at the audience and telling them what to think or feel. But I think
I was going to bring that up later about. I think it's very. I think the first thing sorry, I keep cutting you off. The first thing I texted Patrick afterwards is like, I don't know how to feel about this guy. It's an interesting. So I well done in that.
Yeah. No. We can get into the filmmaking side of that in a second, but so in the same way that the definition of AAU basketball doesn't fit into a neat sort of Webster's dictionary one-liner. Tope's job description does not fit neatly onto a business card either. The simplest way I've come around to defining what he does is, especially, and I think that there's interesting stuff to talk about how he's adapting now in this sort of newer age, but spanning, the 30 years he's been in the game, I think the simplest way to define what he is sort of, he's always been the player's agent before they could have one. So, he says when we meet him, right? It's like my pitch to parents is, what are your goals? What are your dreams? Who are you going to trust to get you there? Somebody who's never done it or somebody who's been doing it for 20 years. And so when you talk about why Tope is so powerful, this is something we really endeavored to make pretty clear in the film, but, I sort of talk, as much as has changed in this world, the sort of foundational power dynamics are the same as they always have, which is that the players have the juice. The players are the sort of like foundational asset that underpins this system. And so the reason Tope has as much power and influence as he does is because I want to be careful with the word I use here verb-wise because it's very sort of subjective, but you could say he either controls this talent, he gatekeeps this talent, he advises this talent, he is who the talent leans on to help them strategize where they want to go. But ultimately, everything about this world is about getting in on the ground floor with the players that any entity is going to ultimately need to achieve their goals, whether that's a college program winning games and championships, whether that's an NBA team drafting the right guy, whatever it is, it requires great players. And so Tope, and it's all a relationship business too. So whether even like for an agent who wants to sign a player, right? It's very, very rare that a 17-year-old blue chip guy is going to sign with an agent he met 2 weeks ago. So like everything in this game is relationship driven. And so Tope is very often the person with the longest standing relationship in any given equation. So the power grows out of that, right? So and that I think, and this isn't like some sort of like cloak and dagger shit. I mean, like this is all you know what to pay attention to. You could just go back and look at, and it's probably still the sort of assistant staffs at these places. And if you paid close enough attention, you would be able to identify the link between Tope and how that person got there. Not saying that they don't deserve to be there. I think, but Tope has installed his guys in places that help the overall operation. And I give a lot of credit to Tope for understanding how the world works, for embedding himself really deeply into it, making himself an indispensable piece of it. And I think he's the best at what he does for a reason. I mean, he's Sonny Vaccaro 2.0, right? I mean, he is the sort of like modern day Sonny. And it'll be really, I am really curious to see what maybe the 3.0 version of Sonny looks like from now going forward. If there's a place for that sort of person, I think that there is, but I think that like, what that person does and the roles they serve is going to evolve some. But kind of going back to what I said before, like a teenager's ability to make good decisions is only as good as the sort of wisdom he surrounded himself with. And there is no substitute for somebody like Tope's Rolodex, contact list, wisdom, and track record, frankly. So.
Yeah. And you talk about him being embedded in all these like power structures. And like, that's one of the most interesting parts of the movie, I think, is like when he takes that Puma meeting and really is like pitching himself to them as like, I can like basically get you the next best 14-year-old basketball player, like Koa Pete, we can make him a Puma athlete, whatever. I am really interested in the Cloak and Dagger shoe company stuff, because I think this came up with the Luka trade this year, because you know, you see, what's his name? Nico just really prioritizing Anthony Davis. And you're like, he used to be a Nike guy. And it's like, wait, hold on. How is like a shoe marketing executive then parlaying that into position to make these like really big basketball decisions? And that like cracks open everything, I think. And I think the film really like gets to like the roots of that.
Nico even has that job is because he spent the reason that Mark Cuban thought to hire him in the first place was, again, the relationships he had built at Nike for however long he was there. Right. But yeah, I mean, that's again, like when you talk about, so now you're making sort of the point that I set out to achieve, which is, you know, on its surface, the Spoils is about AAU basketball, but it is a system portrait in the truest sense, because, you know, the foundational makeup of AAU basketball, you know, we're now talking about on the GM executive side, that stuff rippling up, right? But it all comes back to, we want access to the best players. And so whether that's why Nico Harrison has that job in the first place, or, you know, all of the reasons that anyone that has a livelihood in American basketball has for being close to a great player. They're countless, infinite, right? Like that's the juice, right? Yeah. So I think that this whole world kind of runs on that juice proximity. And when I say that, like, things have changed, but shit stays the same, the juice is the squeeze. It always has been, always will be. The rules can change. The Supreme Court can levy whatever decision they want, you know, whether it's under the table, over the table, blah, blah, fucking blah. Mm-hmm. You know, it's juice proximity. And that's what's made Tope great, is he's close to the juice.
That scene in Heat where he's like, for me,
yeah,
the split action is the juice.
That's really good.
I did.
Yeah, no, shit. I mean, man, speaking my language now, but
one, I want to make a sort of weird point that I think is prescient to all of this, which is like, we are seeing this actually in real time. We saw this in the mid 2010s with this Facebook pivot to video, right? And then we're also seeing this in this the way the metrics on YouTube are changing, and all these people are now short form video content needs to be important. The reason why this stuff matters is that the advertising industry is massive, and so few people know what works. Like it is just fucking, people have no fucking idea what works. People think they think it's paid search, then they think it's this, then they think it's this, you know, whatever. Mm-hmm. Confirmed what works is this Sonny Vaccaro grassroots model. Like, when you get kids wearing this shit, that drives sales. And it's this there's this moment in the doc, or a few times in the doc, where Itu is like, I'll get 10,000 kids wearing the shoes tomorrow or whatever. And so, like, when you find something that works, you put a lot of money into it.
So not only does it work, but like, I think that, and you know, this is the sort of detail that like we didn't really just have space for in the film, but that I think is, I like to point out when I'm having these sorts of in-depth conversations. So the shoe companies have been really astute and savvy for lots of reasons. One of the things though that always stands out to me, I can't remember who told me this. It was an agent. He said, you know, we want to get these guys wearing our shoes because obviously we want to have a relationship with them when they reach the league and, you know, all that stuff. But what they've been really savvy about understanding is that these guys are phenomenal brand ambassadors in their own communities. So when you think about, like, I don't know if you guys probably don't have kids that are in middle school, but you know, I remember going back for me in middle school and high school, like, yeah, I wanted to wear Jordans because Jordan had Jordans, but like, kids want to be like the best player in their neighborhood or at their school as much, if not in some cases more, than the guy they're watching on TV. So it's a longer play or a longer play strategy that these companies have been able to kind of deploy here. But as much as people want to be wear Kobe's because it's Kobe, and wear, it's like the dude can't even make is on the JV team. He probably looks up to the best player on the varsity team as much because that's more attainable. Like, he interfaces with that person every single day.
That's
that
really
dude's probably
interesting,
doing the business in practice every single day. Like, he's making that shoe look good in his face, literally every single day. And so when you talk about the sales ramifications of that, I think that just is another layer of the sort of, no pun intended, foothold strategy here that the shoe companies have been really brilliant about executing on.
Yeah, and it's like the nature of the competition between the shoe companies I find extremely interesting and like pretty evil, honestly, because it's like you think about someone like Nike, like this established giant. Like, I have only basically ever hooped in Nikes my whole life, but then like that's because I was marketed to, slightly in basically the same era, and like I have always thought of them as like the number one cool guy shoe. But like the way to topple that brand position is not to like necessarily go after big NBA stars. It's like probably cheaper to buy like a 14-year-old's allegiance than it is to like, I don't know, sign. Well, the Puma example is funny because it's like DeAndre Ayton and Marvin Bagley. We got the top 2 picks in the draft. Like,
If only they had hit.
They're taking swings. I mean, look, like what they tried to execute or what they tried to bring Tope in to deliver on was a really bold, big swing, right? But, I think, well, first of all, isn't Halliburton a Puma athlete? I think they just came
and
out.
Shea's on Converse, yeah.
So, but even, the Pumas, we can laugh at Marvin Bagley and, that class, but like, LaMelo's a Puma guy.
Breonna Stewart, yeah.
Yeah, like they're figuring it out. And, like Nike's checkbook is pretty thick. So, if anything, I sort of applaud Puma for being willing to play. And you're not going to just sort of like out traditional Nike. Right.
Yeah, right.
So, I think on the ethical side, and we can go into whatever version you guys want to talk about here. But like, I think it's important to say, because I've been obviously making films and working in this world for a long time, and going back to the sort of one note piece about this conversation, everyone, like the intellectual academic piece of this is very, very straightforward, right? It's like these guys have been getting fucked for decades. They haven't had their share of the pie. Now they do, and that's a good thing, like Pat just said.
Right.
I just want to point out that I'm not here to say that on paper any of that is not true. But the moment you migrate this question from something that's intellectual or academic to something that's personal, which is to say, take it to a parent and ask them what they think would be best for their kid. And if they want to subject their child to this machine and the reservations, anxieties, and fears they have around that, it instantly changes.
That's interesting, yeah.
Instantly. Which I think says a lot about, number one, the fucking money worship that pervades almost every conversation in America, right? Like, people only understand money. It's the only thing that most people's brains is sort of like sophisticated enough to comprehend, which I think is its own tragedy. But like, money is the only thing these fucking people understand. But like, the moment that you have that it's my kid, now all of a sudden I have questions. Now all of a sudden I'm second guessing this fucking one note shit, right? Like, do I want to brand my 15-year-old? Do I want to have him consider making these sorts of considerations and compromises and calculations and juggling all this shit? Like, I don't know. Is that in his best interest?
Do I want my kid, I am joking, but do I want my kid to be the Rizzler? It's like, no.
Like, and then let's even go, like, but like, take it a step further. Like, I was just talking with my friends the other day about like how fucking bland this generation of NBA players are. Waz talks about this all the time. Like,
we got a good essay for you.
The sort of like polished like all these kids have been in front of a camera since they were fucking 10. They all know exactly what the right thing to say is, but they have nothing of real substance to say about anything. Maybe Ant is probably the sort of like outlier here,
totally.
Or Ja in his own fucking goofy ass way. But for the most part, like, there's just no vitality to to me. When I watch the NBA right now, it's a very dead inside product. It's so corporate. It's so curated. It's so safe. There's just no vibrancy to it, which is why like I'm just not drawn to it. And I think that when we're talking about the long-term viability of this product, like people talk about the NBA's place at the center of American culture as if it's a given. I think as we all three know, it was not always that way. And there's nothing that promises it will always be that way. And I think that the NBA fans have absolutely picked up on how the business is the bottom line for most of these guys, right? Like, I think it's Ethan, whom I really respect in the film, who says the NBA can handle 10 guys thinking of themselves as their own business. Can the NBA really handle 450 guys regarding themselves as a business before they regard themselves just like on an identity level as a basketball player, right? And like, I think that you're seeing that manifest itself in the fan relationship. I would also say that the fan relationship with the players has never been worse.
It's funny.
Gambling.
Yeah, there's gambling. Yeah,
money worship. We got to the gambling part, but like, how many videos do you see of courtside, like the KD or whomever, like talking shit? Like they don't. There's this weird, and part of it I think is how much they make, which is not their fault. But like, I just think that the average relationship between the fan and the NBA players themselves has never been worse. And I think part of that is subconscious and has to do with a lot of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, it's a great. I don't disagree. Like I don't hear that, and I'm like, no chance. Like I think there's a lot of truth to that. There's a funny part which where I would add is like that we've talked a little bit about, but it's almost also all got sucked up into the phone. So in the way that this is if you just think of. And to your point, like, I think this is a horrible metric, but if you just think of social media engagement as an example of fan and player connection, if you looked at that number, you'd be like, oh, it's fucking going to the moon. That is not a good.
You can also point to like fan interest, and there are all sorts of like internet search metrics that prove this out. But like the most rabid fan month for the NBA is like July.
Right.
Yeah. Free agency.
So if
so
that,
funny. It's so stupid.
If that doesn't demonstrate that the main thing is no longer the main thing, I don't even know what else I would point. Like that, to me, that's the ultimate demonstration of that. And the NBA and like, again, the NBA seems fine with this.
Well, and why shouldn't they be, as an organization, trying to make money? I mean, look, I'm with you, spirit of the game. I totally am with you. But they just signed a fucking giant ass media deal. They're probably like, let's go.
They did. I mean, but like, even so, like, this is a small thing that doesn't probably merit more than 30 seconds here on this pod. But like, even like, why the fuck don't they have a game on Father's Day? And I can tell you, because it's some balance between like, there's some corporate reason for it.
Uh-huh.
But like, I remember watching Michael Jordan win his 4th title on Father's Day with my dad and crying in the locker room. Now, granted, his dad got murdered and all these things played into that. But like, I remember watching games with my, like that. The NBA would just be like, nah, we're good. We don't need to put our highest level product to consume for these families together on as like a thing that would bring a family together today. That they don't even fucking register that as like a missed opportunity, to me, is again, like, I don't understand it. And I'm sure there's some viewership, like some advertising metric or whatever about that says, well, actually Monday nights are an important fucking window for us for X, Y, and Z. It's like, eat a dick. I don't care.
Well, I was trying to think about like gaming out what the NBA's argument would be. And I think you can make it, but I think it sucks, where they would basically be like, we don't want to compete against like the golf thing that happened yesterday. And therefore like enter into this, like, people would be like, oh, your ratings were bad compared to golf, and therefore it has all this like ramifications about cultural decline. And like, if you're a basketball fan, like, who gives a fuck? You want to watch the game, right? Like, I'm not rooting for the NBA TV ratings. Like, I like the basketball. That's why I watch.
Like, let's build some new fans. Like, let's bring in a new 5-year-old who's like, you know what I mean?
To watch that core memory, yeah.
To watch his dad Maybe, mom's like, yeah, go watch the game. Like, it's Father's Day. Like, I don't know, man. Like,
all right. Let's. I want to get you out of here in a reasonable time, but I want to touch on this crypto stuff because it dovetails very interestingly with a kind of beat of this podcast. Patrick just got back from a crypto conference. He's written a few interesting pieces about. He wrote a very interesting piece about Haktua and the coin stuff, which is relevant because there's this funny. We talked about maybe before we were recording how it takes a while for a documentary to come out, and a lot of the events of this stuff happened in 2000. Well, it happened. You interviewed Ichu for a long time, but and then a lot of this, there's been more recent stuff in meme coins and stuff. But to set it up, there's a chapter in the documentary toward the end about positing or putting forth a possible wrinkle to all of this, which is the emerging partnership between some crypto companies, the main one in this, or the only one in this one being Swan, which is a crypto.
What do they do?
Exchange. I know that the guy is a Bitcoin maxi, but anyway,
the question before I start clarifying.
There is a lot of overlap in a thematic overlap between taking the power away from the top and redistributing it and no middleman and etc. in the ethos of the way that at least Bitcoin talks about itself, whether or not that's true, etc. We don't know. But so I just wanted to, in this chapter, which I don't want to step on the doc, people should go listen to it, but explores this idea of like, does Bitcoin offer a possible solution or a possible angle or wrinkle here to this deeply complicated system that we are unpacking here. So where did the Bitcoin stuff come to you? Did that just happen naturally? What's your angle on it?
I have a lot to say on this,
sure.
But I'll try to pick my spots and be efficient. So, number one,
so it's all about.
There's no shit coinery happening over here at all. So I want to really just start this by saying,
sure,
Bitcoin only. If it's not Bitcoin, it's a shit coin. And there's nothing in the film that advocates for anything other than a strictly Bitcoin strategy.
That's true. That is true.
To answer your question, it happened organically, and it was something that was fascinating because I think, and Toby even talks about it in the film, the shoe companies have had a vice grip on the sort of infrastructure of this world for a very, very long time. So when this materialized, I was really interested in it. I didn't know a lot about Bitcoin at the time. And from a new paradigm standpoint, I thought it was fascinating on its own right, because there's nothing that's written in stone that says the shoe companies should be the only sort of sponsorship entities of this world. And it stands to reason that lots of different sorts of companies would want to have relationships with these young, potentially famous, influential young, next generation athletes. What I will say is when it happened, I had to do a really deep dive on Bitcoin specifically, because I'm really proud of The Spoils for so many reasons. I think it's just fearlessly original, unique film that has more deep, honest access to the way this world really works than any film that's ever been made. And I'll stand on that. And if anyone wants to hold up another movie that can hang with it in that regard, please show it. I say this humbly, please show me. Mm-hmm. Because in the 10, 12 years of making this film, I was fanatically researching every sports document, looking for things to references, templates. What did this movie do well? What did this movie not do well? What do I want to avoid? All these things. It really was kind of like this sort of godsend of a wrinkle story-wise for me, because again, on the originality of the film, I knew I was going to have to wear Bitcoin reputationally as I've always been the sort of basketball movie guy, but now you're going to be that Bitcoin basketball movie.
Yeah.
And if this is bullshit and a scam, then I'm going to have to walk around the world wearing that name tag.
Yeah.
So I very quickly started, going down the rabbit hole and, trying to understand it. And to this day, I'll just simply say I came out on the other side deeply convinced that Bitcoin is the best money humans have ever had access to. I think it is the greatest and most potent savings technology that we've ever had access to. And I will say, I said this last year when the film premiered at the NBA Film Festival. I said this on stage to Matt Weiner. In this player empowerment era, I really believe that Bitcoin is the ultimate player empowerment tool. Because when we're talking about athletes specifically who have a very narrow earning window, it's imperative that they capture and store all the value that they generate during that window. And I think, I'm not here to orange pill your audience, but I would invite them to go take a look at the now 16-year performance of Bitcoin specifically. It is the best performing asset on the planet. And I personally don't think that I wouldn't want to be denominating my life savings in dollars personally. And so, I think that basically this kind of comes down to like, not only did I find it to be a fascinating new sponsorship paradigm for this world, I find it to be, I think, the most revolutionary player empowerment tool that's like out there that like barely anybody still recognizes. But kind of to sum this all up, I would say if we are going to financialize every corner of this world, starting at age 10, let's at least do it with better money.
Sure.
And so, I push back. This is not a crypto film. This is a Bitcoin basketball movie. And I hope that, if even 10, 50, 100, 1,000 people see this movie and they are inspired to go study Bitcoin, specifically Bitcoin. I want to say that over and over and over again.
Right.
Study Bitcoin, learn about it. And the great thing is it's a sort of Trojan horse because Bitcoin will do the same thing for the savings portfolio or profile of a dentist as it does for a basketball player. Basketball player is just a really great allegory for it because they have such a short, condensed earning window. So I ultimately was like, yes. Actually, I'll just say Bitcoin has totally changed the way I see the world. And I'm very proud to say that. So
You've taken 2 orange pills, the big round basketball and then the Bitcoin orange pill itself.
I guess that a brand new feature film coming out later this fall that's all about Bitcoin. So
do you? Okay.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
I guess
gotta have you back on when that happens.
One of the last things you said was like that, like it doesn't really specifically have anything to do with them being basketball players or not. Like a dentist could do this. So I guess like why, like, what do you make of the synergy of Bitcoin and basketball then? Because it seems to me like basically this is just like an applied way of like earning more money. And then like the basketball of it all is like fairly incidental. It doesn't actually seem to be like a good synthesis. Like we talked about players being so individualistic. And to me, that's one of like the defining things of Bitcoin and Bitcoin culture is it's like this applied kind of like almost libertarian individualism. So then like, I guess why, what about basketball makes it a good fit to you?
Well, there's a lot of directions I could take this in, but let me maybe come at it this way. The notion of the concept of a Bitcoin athlete. And I'll just give you guys a little bit of a preview. So in the film, Corey, who's the CEO of Swan Bitcoin, he says something that blew the doors open on my conception of Bitcoin. And it ultimately became the sort of like foundational idea of this new film. And he said, and this is in the film, he says, by 2030, Bitcoin will be the most powerful brand in the world.
Oh yeah, I did read.
Bigger than Coke, bigger than
it's top 10 already. Yeah.
It's top 10 already. And I was still learning about Bitcoin at the time, but like it was a really mind-blowing idea because all of these other brand competitors in that conversation are private companies with marketing departments, marketing budgets, teams and scores of people whose sole job it is to brand and sloganize and, develop the brand identity of this thing, right? And so the idea that this totally decentralized, owned by nobody no CEO, no corporate headquarters, no, like this new emerging money as a brand would become the most powerful brand in the world was fascinating to me. And so when I look at how branded this space is, going back to the shoe company strategies, right? Like when I say the term Nike athlete to you, I think we all have imagery, taglines, associational qualities that define what a Nike athlete is. And I think that we are on the precipice of a new type of athlete that is not beholden to that sort of limiting brand identity. And, the concept of a Bitcoin athlete in direct comparison to like an Adidas athlete or a Nike athlete. I think Bitcoin is the most significant invention of this century. And I think that we are in the very early innings of the entire world waking up to that. And I think that athletes specifically can be really powerful ambassadors on this front. And this is literally the through line of my new film. So, but yeah, Patrick, I would say that I ultimately came to be extraordinarily proud of the third act of The Spoils, and it has since launched an entire feature dedicated to a lot of this thesis. So
thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
I was thrilled to bring, I think, some important ideas to the end of a basketball film. I think our film.
No, I was going to say it's situated. I think you're right to say that this is not a cryptocurrency documentary. This is a basketball documentary with some cryptocurrency. Much like this episode of this podcast.
The Spoils is about a lot of things about American life, and I think the basketball world is a really interesting microcosm for things that infiltrate every corner of our lives. So
there you go. Mike Nicoll, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for
go watch The Spoils. Where is it going to be out?
Yeah, so it's just talking about the content distribution. It's actually premiering on YouTube in 4 parts, starting actually on this last Friday.
Oh, that's cool.
Part
Nice.
1. YouTube is the biggest audience in the world. So people like to talk about how Netflix is killing the streaming world, but actually YouTube is bodying Netflix. So we've got a great deal with YouTube. So it's dropping in 4 parts. First part 1 came out a few days ago. Part 2 is coming out this Friday. And part 1, 2, 3, 4 over the next few weeks. It's also available on Amazon Prime to buy and rent. And I will send you guys those links so you can post them in the show notes or whatever. But just Google The Spoils, Selling the Future of American Basketball, Amazon, YouTube, pretty much everywhere on the other side of one click here. So
Beautiful.
Sweet. Thank you.
thanks, guys.